Another dark log from the diary of a griever named John Weaver, which is me. Well, evening zombies, how we doing this evening? It's 9:44 at night, Saturday, Pacific Standard Time, and we're ending January 17th, 2026. In about a few weeks, we're going to have another ship do a flyby around the moon with 4 humans on it. Just to go around the moon once and come back on a free-range trajectory. The new ship, compared to the old Saturns that launched back in the 60s and 70s heading to the moon, this is going to be different. It took nearly a decade of training from military pilots into astronaut pilots of what they had to do when going to the moon and landing on it and coming back home compared to what they have right now. Back in the 60s and 70s, we had launched multi-billion-dollar monstrosities into the sky. Singular, tall, monster rockets called the Saturn V's. When launching an unmanned one out just to test it, to see if it would work. Imagine what the squeals were like back in Florida and in surrounding areas, and not to mention the Richter scales going off. That much thrust coming out of those engines, heading into space. And then, every so often, you would put men on top of those things in a small capsule, testing out the equipment in space, performing the maneuvers they needed to do, and then fly off to the moon. They can do a lot of computer simulations and other things these days to test out their docking capabilities, but in the 60s to the 70s, they had to prove that they knew what the hell they were doing. I mean, they could test them out with models and stuff as they can here on Earth, but in space was the real challenge. I mean, first they had Mercury, one solo astronaut. Of course, we had a political game going on. Human race did. War between the United States and Russia. They launched a satellite, we launched a satellite. They launched a dog, and we launched a chimpanzee. Russia's launched a human being, we did. They tried to keep the guy up and didn't keep him up a little bit longer. We launched a few more guys up there, kept it a lot longer. Get the endurance records all they can. The Russians wanted to go to Mars, actually wanted to go to the moon. So they were going just for one large leap. Didn't work too well for these guys. Tried the ship blow up on pad. But as for NASA, we were going to do it in stages. We had Gemini. We had about 12 missions, I think. We had 24 people going in space, testing out their ships and their docking capabilities, seeing how much of endurance that they can deal with in space, how they could live in space for a short time. Because they had to endure about nearly 2 weeks of it until they get to the moon back. And then came Apollo. Of course, they had their death and tragedy to kick things off. It sucked. A training seminar. a training session of pure oxygen, testing out the cabin to see if it was going to be okay on Earth. But they were trying to test out the capsule with pure oxygen. And because of lousy construction in there, it killed 3 astronauts. Set them back about a year and a half, but they kept going. They were trying to fight the clock that President John F. Kennedy made back in the early 60s of getting 3 guys, or actually getting a man on the moon. That takes 3 guys for it. You have to have a pilot, co-pilot, and a lunar module pilot. It's not just one ship that they would have to launch, it would be a combination. And they would have other industries to make this lander. And their landers worked. Tested out in space, tested out on the moon in the first landing. Apollo 11. And a few more before the budget ran out and they had to retire and scrap. Or use what's left of the Apollo for Skylab. Modify the fuselages into a space station where astronauts could spend months at a time in there. Maybe a lot shorter than the International Space Station time, but it was still progress in the 70s. But they were making their plans to go into space with the space shuttle. They wanted the International Space Station, and they had to build up their endurance. But they used up the old Saturn engines all the way through Skylab, and after that, they got themselves a space glider. And for 30 years, and 2 major accidents, they had it. And built ships. Actually, they built a station. And did satellite maintenance until also budget ran out. But now, we're back in space again. Civilians tried. The civilians are doing. One does a suborbital pop shot in the sky. But another one actually does go out and crew and recrew and re-recrew the International Space Station. Who is that one particular billionaire wants to get a crash and burn? He wants to see his own space colonies out there. But I don't see him. I don't see him going. All I keep seeing is blowing up ships or not getting their own damn tubes working. One major aerospace industry bowed out or still in amends, trying to get their own ship going in space. Maybe they can't do it. I don't know if they could. And NASA and others have gone to another ship with a space launch system this time. Instead of big, bulky, and powerful like you would see the Saturn in its singular form, it looked like it was a cheap shot of the Space Shuttle transportation system. 2 smaller rocket boosts, then 1 larger rocket, singular. Then after that, you got a little pop shot, small capsule that'll have 4 astronauts. Well, maybe not so much small. And this ship will fly around the moon and come back. Just to say, we're back, boys and girls. Other countries are trying to do a lunar lander. They tried with their robots. Few have succeeded, others haven't. But we're still trying to do a lunar lander again. This time not for a visit, but this time to stay. Now granted, it's been since the 2022 since we've already seen an unmanned ship similar that's going to be launching in February, going around the moon and coming back. We'll see what happens. We'll see what happens.